Hi there, welcome to my channel. Have you ever wondered how well do leveraged ETFs really perform, especially during market crashes? Does it beat the underlying index? Those are important questions because you are taking a lot of risks by investing in leveraged ETF. If it doesn't end up beating the underlying index, then what's the point of taking the risk, right? So in this video, I'm going to share with you how did QQQ3, which is a leveraged ETF tracking 3 times of daily returns of NASDAQ 100, in America there is an equivalent called TQQQ, perform during 4 major market crashes in the past in comparison to the underlying index, which is NASDAQ 100. You will see that if you had invested £1,000 just before the Black Monday in 1987 and held onto your investment until the 27th of March 2000, which is 1 day before the dot-com crash, your money would have grown from £1,000 into nearly £1 million. And this is the first video of a series of 3 videos about leveraged ETFs. In the second video, I'll show you the actual performance numbers of TQQQ's performance in comparison to NASDAQ 100, SP 500, and some industry-leading tech stocks, as well as ordinary funds, so that it will help you make a judgment as to whether holding TQQQ over a long period of time would be a good idea or not. If this sounds interesting to you, carry on watching and I will share all my findings with you. Let's have a look at the performance comparisons between QQQ3 and NASDAQ 100, which is the underlying index. And the period I have chosen is between 5th of October 1987, which was pretty much the peak day before the Black Monday, which led to the 1987 market crash, and the day before the dot-com bubble burst in March 2000. It will give you an idea of whether it's worth investing in the leveraged ETF, and if you decide it is worthwhile, what kind of volatility is there to be expected. So if you look at the graph, there was a huge spike in an orange line was QQQ3. So in the QQQ3 performance, around 1999, which was the year before the dot-com bubble burst, so it makes sense there was a huge bubble being blown up at the time. So that kind of skews the whole graph and makes really difficult to examine the rest of it. So if I take that bit out, it's a bit better. So what I have changed it to now is up until 2 years before the dot-com bubble burst. So as you can see, there's still a pretty impressive outperformance here from about 1994 onwards to 1998. If we have a look at the actual numbers in the left panel here, the column G actually shows you the performance differences between QQQ3 and NASDAQ 100. When it's red and it's minus numbers, it means QQQ3 was underperforming NASDAQ 100. So if we scroll down, it's actually quite a long period of underperformance here, all the way to Boxing Day. In 1991, QQQ3 finally started outperforming NASDAQ 100 again. So this would have been about 4 years and 3 months on from the actual crash in 1987 before QQQ3 started outperforming again. But it actually very quickly started underperforming again about 4 months on, and then it's in the red again, and then it's up. So there's quite a bit of volatility here. Let's go back to the graph here. So it wasn't until after about August 1994 it really started taking off. So if we have a look at the period between 1994 all the way to the dot-com bubble burst, have a look at what that tells us. So if we have a look at it here, again, because this huge spike here really skews the graph, so it's difficult to look at the actual comparison in around here. So the actual numbers will probably tell us a bit more. So if I look at here, the comparison is astonishing actually. Just a reminder, this is assuming you put in £1,000 at the peak time before the 1987 crash. Okay, so if you had done that, then and held on to your investment in QQQ3, then from 1994 onwards, you would have consistently outperformed NASDAQ 100 for the next 6 years. Obviously, again, you would really need to get your timing nailed down, because as we will see later, the dot-com crash would easily wipe out all your good performance during this time. So there you go. This is the performance comparison in the about 10 years between 1994 and 2004. So during this time, you would have ridden the market up as the dot-com bubble was building and really loving your returns. Then there is this sharp, extremely sharp drop in 2000 when the bubble eventually burst. It would wipe out all of the outperformance in the past 6 years or so. So if we have a look at actual numbers on the left, the volatility is huge. So yeah, some of these outperformances here. Let's look at when was the peak. The peak was about 23rd of March 2000. Your investment in QQQ3 would be outperforming the underlying index NASDAQ 100 by about, wow, that's 959 times. So that's crazy. If you had to put in £1,000 on the 5th of October 1987, right before the Black Monday, your money would be worth almost £1 million the day before the dot-com crash if you had invested in QQQ3, whereas the NASDAQ 100 would have given you 22,000 instead. Wow, that's a huge difference. And imagine having that all wiped out. Let's go down here. So wow, look at these numbers. It's already, so in 2002 your money would have gone from nearly $1 million to a few thousand, although you would still be making some money. And actually now it's turning red. Your money you would have lost money after holding your investment in QQQ3 for about 15 years. It would be worth less in 2002, and then it become less and more, and to 2004 your investment would be worth £2,200 in QQQ3, but if you had to put your money in NASDAQ 100, your money would be worth £6,600. So let's have a look at the performance comparison between QQQ3, which is a leveraged ETF, and QQQ, which is the underlying index, NASDAQ 100. The period we're looking at is between the day before the dot-com crash which was the 27th of March 2000, all the way to date, to the latest data I have downloaded from Yahoo Finance. So that is as of the 8th of March 2021. It's pretty clear on the graph what the comparison is. Note that the blue line is the underlying index, NASDAQ 100, and the orange line is the value of the leveraged ETF, TQQQ3, which is supposed to be tracking 3 times the daily returns of NASDAQ 100. So it's pretty clear on the graph that the leveraged ETF has been massively underperforming for the total of almost 21 years, and that is pretty devastating. If you had been really unlucky and invested at the worst time, which was 1 day before the dot-com crash, you would not have recovered your money since. So as you can see on the line, 21 years down the line, from March 2000, you would still be losing money if you had invested in the leveraged ETF TQQQ3. However, if you had invested in the underlying index instead, you would have recovered and actually have made quite a bit of money. So next, let's have a look at the comparison between the performances of TQQQ3 and NASDAQ 100 after the financial crisis. So I have chosen the date range as 1 day before the actual crash, the 26th of September 2008. As you can see here, on the day afterwards, the NASDAQ 100 crashed more than 10%. And all the way until the most recent data, which is as of the 8th of March 2021. So let's have a look at the graph first. As you can see, it seems like around this point here, that's where the leveraged ETF started to outperform NASDAQ 100. So if I hover over it, so you can see it's around 2013. Let's have a look at the actual data here. So you can see that there's some sporadic outperformance or kind of breaking even between the leveraged ETF and NASDAQ 100 around 2011, and we go down. If we keep scrolling down, and at the beginning of 2012, there's some more outperformance here, some pretty big outperformance here, so 23% and more. But when it got to May 2012, it started to underperform. So the ETF started to underperform the index again. And so in the end, it was not until the beginning of 2013 that the ETF then really started consistently outperform NASDAQ 100. So as you can see, from then on, it's all green all the way down to the end. And you can see the outperformance is pretty impressive. So if you had invested in £1,000 the day before the financial crisis started in 2008, by now, which is about 12.5 years later, your money would have turned into 60,000 if your investment was in the leveraged ETF. And your money would have turned into £7,500 if you had invested in the NASDAQ 100 index instead. The performance differences between the two is pretty large. That's about
52 times. That's just the difference. It seems that this data tell us that if you had the time, if your horizon could be more than 12.5 years or 13 years, it might be worth investing in QQQ3 instead. Now, let's have a look at the performance comparison between QQQ3 and NASDAQ 100 after the coronavirus crash. So I have drawn a graph here. The orange line is the QQQ3 performance and the blue line is NASDAQ 100. And I have chosen the period from one day before the actual crash up until now, which is the 8th of March 2021. So as we can see, right after the crash, QQQ3 was clearly underperforming the NASDAQ 100, which is to be expected. And at some point here, it started to cross the NASDAQ 100 performance line and outperformed and underperformed, and then fluctuate a bit. And then this point, which is around November the 20th, it seems to be showing the date in the American format, where the performance of QQQ3 started outperforming NASDAQ 100 quite significantly, before then dropping and almost become the same as NASDAQ 100 again. Let's see when that was. So that was not longer, about a month ago, 11th of February 2021. If we have a look at the actual numbers on the left panel here, as mentioned earlier, this column G here shows you the difference between the QQQ3 performance and NASDAQ 100 performance in percentage terms. So when it's red, it means QQQ3 was underperforming the NASDAQ 100 index. So if we scroll down, we see there's some green here. On one of those days, so September the 2nd, QQQ3 was actually outperforming NASDAQ 100 by almost 21%. But it soon went downhill because there was one day of really bad performance of NASDAQ 100, and then it very quickly, QQQ3 very quickly deteriorated. And then it came back up, and then down again, and then up again from November onwards. So at the time of this video, QQQ3 is outperforming NASDAQ 100 by about 9.7%, which is not a lot considering how much more risk you are taking with QQQ3. So since the coronavirus, there really hasn't been a long period of outperformance. Although if you had timed the market exactly right, you could have some pretty good returns in terms of outperformance. So you would have made 45% more, which looks like the absolute peak of QQQ3 performance. So if you manage to time the market exactly right and sold your holding on that day, you would have made a pretty good return on your investment. However, timing the market like this is extremely difficult, so I wouldn't attempt it personally myself.
It seems to me that there are really mixed results. With the exception of dot-com bubble burst, the 1987 crash, the financial crisis, as well as COVID-19 crash, they were all crashes where NASDAQ 100 took less than a year to recover. And it seems to me that within that horizon, QQQ3 then is able to recover quickly and then exceeds the return of the underlying index. However, if you get hit by a major crash like the dot-com bubble that took NASDAQ 100 15 years and 7 months to recover, then the game is really off, with QQQ3 still losing about 95% in 20 years. You'd be still waiting for your money to come back. So what do you think about leveraged ETFs? After looking at the numbers, do you think it's still a risk you'd like to take? Do you think its reward outweighs the risks? Do you think there will be another major market crash like the dot-com bubble that makes leveraged ETFs really not worthwhile? If you care to share your thoughts, I would love to hear about it down below in the comment section. If you would like to check out my other 2 videos on the same topic, you can click the link right here to check them out. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel for all my future updates. I upload videos regularly on the subject of investing. I'll see you at the next video. Bye everybody!